Well, we're sitting kind of where you can't see both of us, but we thought we'd say hi.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
So, Jim's going to start with prayer.
Yes. So kneel or bow your heads as we pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for a beautiful day out there. We also ask you to be with our church family as we present this lesson this morning, and show us what we need to do in order to do it properly. We ask you to give us strength and wisdom, and show us how to present this. We pray in the name of your precious Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay. Well, today we're going to continue our study of Ellen White's Vision of the Path, Part 3. And we're not going to just read this transcript. We are going to read a summary and then go through the lines. And we're reading the summary so you can get an idea of what we're going to look at as we go through the lines. We're not going to probably look at or be able to look at the chat. So if you have a comment, you can just make it as we go. So a hard time speaking extemporaneously, so I have an introduction I'm going to read here. So some points I wanted to make are that there are many lines that are reviewed to develop the study. And the lines have so much information on them that they become very complex. We also want to remind you that Elder Tess has suggested many times that we place ourselves where we are now on the lines. So we've done that through the study also. We made a few notes as we went along just so we could remember, and you'll see those notes with each line. But also that the complexity of the lines reminded us of ideas to keep in mind that we have learned in understanding reform lines. And that is, first of all, to remember what Ellen White said about prophecy, that it is a delineation of events. And that reminds us that that means they're on a line and they're in a sequence. Also, that symbols can have more than one meaning, and that events can have more than one symbol. And these ideas are important to understand how the lines are aligned one upon the other to compare them. And I think we'll see that as we go through the study. So I'm going to start the share. Let's see, can people see it? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Because we're going to use the one microphone there because
Okay. Yeah.
So we won't have the echo. Okay, so we're going to begin with the summary of Ellen White's Vision of the Path, Part 3.
So we placed ourselves on several lines throughout the study. The history of the end of ancient Israel is our key. It explains the success of the end of modern Israel. Elder Tess told us that the structure stands firm for both histories. In each history, there is a group successfully prepared to bring the work to completion. We trace the overarching reform lines: 144,000 priests, Levites, and Nethinims. We showed John the Revelator, the disciples, the Jewish nation at Pentecost, and the Gentiles at 34 AD.
We looked at John the Revelator in Jacob's time of trouble. After 70 AD, he went through that experience. Every earthly support was cut off. He could not buy or sell. He was given a death decree, but he lived to witness the second advent. We recognize that the time of trouble for the first group called was a history between the cross and Pentecost. The disciples suffered in the period shortly after the cross before they went into the upper room. We understood that we can also link that period with the experience of Christ in the wilderness after 30 years of preparation for the priesthood. We overlaid them: Jacob's time of trouble, the history after the cross, the history of the wilderness after Christ's 30 years preparation and baptism, and we placed where we are in those times.
Then we went to Ellen White's dream. We discussed how every earthly support is cut off. Okay. We discussed how every earthly support is cut off near the end of the journey. We saw how we would have had earthly support this whole journey, whatever that earthly support has looked like. We have had our pet doctrines, our baggage from Adventism, which is really baggage from the apostate evangelical Christianity. We managed to take that baggage so far. At the beginning, to get us over that first hurdle, God had to work with us in a special way. He took the reins of the horses and he guided them himself. But he gives us the cords, the parable methodology. They travel with us through the entire remainder of the period. We each hold on to our own cord. We each must have confidence in the parable methodology. As the path becomes difficult, people let go of their cords and fall away. These cords continue to grow, and we must allow our entire weight to depend upon the support of these cords when we reach a chasm. This chasm is described in the language of Gethsemane. It is also described in the same language as Ellen White uses for Christians' experience in the wilderness, when he had no bread, when there is no new message. In midst of that agony, people are required to cross this chasm to heaven, to the second advent, with no foundation beneath their feet, no earthly support. The only security that they have is in the lines of parable methodology. That is sufficient if they are trusted. At a particular point, everyone starts to question what holds the lines. They must get to the point of remembering their past history and how they have been led. They must recognize that God holds the lines. Once they trust them, those lines will bring them to the other side and out of this time of trouble. People leave all along this pathway. It is only those lines that will bring us to the other side. So we start to review those lines. It is no time to say, "You're repeating what we've already heard before. Therefore, I will close my ears." That would be dangerous. We must understand and have faith in those lines.
We discussed what else holds us to this movement. What support may some people be losing? It isn't all earthly goods. It may be ideas, doctrines, worldviews, misunderstandings about the kingdom of God. Those may be the things that have held us on this pathway other than the lines. They will no longer support us in this time period. We either choose to trust the lines and travel with them, or we go over the cliff face, holding on to our wrong understanding of the nature of the kingdom. There is more than one error regarding the nature of the kingdom. There is more than one ditch. There are two ditches. They are belief in an activist liberal movement and belief in a socially conservative movement. Neither of these is supported by the lines. These are the ditches on either side of the straight and narrow path that hinder people from holding their cords securely.
We continue to review our lines. We went to Acts 27. We saw how both the line of the institutions and the line of the 144,000 place us in the swelling of the message now. The message that warns the institutions that they are about to be shipwrecked, but it also prepares the 144,000 for the Sunday law. It helps us understand what this waymark looks like and how to prepare for it. The increase of knowledge came right on time in 2019, understanding that the message of equality had implications for the Sunday law itself, for the sin of the USA itself.
We started to review the lines of the revolutions, but we had to go back. Before we could understand the revolutions, we had to first understand how we got to them, how we made 2014 midnight and midway. When we remind ourselves of that, then we can start to understand the literal histories of the revolutions that build up that study. So now we're going to, those are the things that we're going to be looking at through this study. And here I've written to remind us that symbols have more than one meaning. Events can have more than one symbol. And the reference from Ellen White is prophecy was seen to be a figurative delineation of events leading down to the close of this Earth's history. Second selected message is 102.1. Okay, we're going to start with these lines.
Yeah, so here we have the 144, the line of the 144,000. And it starts with ancient Israel and modern Israel. Oops. It starts with ancient Israel and modern Israel. So we have 4 BC in 1989, 27 AD in 9/11, 34 AD in the Sunday law, 70 AD in the close of probation, and 100 AD in the second advent. And we can see that John the Revelator is representing us on that line. And Patmos is showing where John received the revelation of Jesus Christ on the Isle of Patmos, which represents the second advent. Then we have the first 2 calls to the church. The first one being the priests who represent the disciples. Then we have the second call to the Levites, who represent the Jews after Pentecost. And then the last call to the world is to the Nethinims, and they represent the Gentiles. Then if we go back up and look at the lines there, we can see that there's a black X and a red X. And the black X represents where we were when Elder Tess first gave this study, and we've already moved towards the Sunday law where the red X is. And on the line of the priests, we can see that the black X where we were in 2020 was between 2019 and 2021. And now we're just about at Pentecost and Panium. So in the second advent for the priest.
Mhm. Yes, and we can see where events can have different symbols. Like 2021 has Pentecost, Panium, and the second advent. And also we want to note that where we are now in the line of the 144,000 is during that early rain. Are there any questions or comments about this? Okay, then we'll continue. Oops, sorry. Okay, here we're talking about we read a reference from Desire of Ages 121.3, where Ellen White compared the Jacob time of trouble with Christ in the wilderness. And we overlaid priest line from 2019 to 2021, and John the Revelator as representative of the priest from 70 AD to 100 AD. And those are overlaid with the line of the 144,000 from the close of probation to the second advent. And during that dispensation occurs the Jacob's time of trouble and the last great conflict with Satan. We also know, I think we're all pretty familiar with this dispensation and how there's the harvest of the 144,000. There's a death decree, and then there's a time right before the second advent that's revealed for us. And during that period, there's no earthly support, no new message, and there's the wilderness and Gethsemane experience is happening during that time too. And that's where we have the other lines to compare with. The line of Christ is Melchizedek priest after 30 years of preparation. And of course that correlates with the 30 years of preparation that we've had as priests. Then it comes to his baptism, and he goes into the wilderness, and there he has a conflict with Satan or Lucifer, and he's tempted and tested. During that time, there's no bread, no message, no earthly support, and that can be overlaid again with the priests and the disciples, who are the first group called, and that includes John the Baptist. John the Revelator. I have to keep reminding myself, the Revelator, okay? And we've seen that he went from the time of the end all the way to the second advent, which is why he is a representative of us. But anyway, he was there at the cross along with the priests, the other disciples, and we as priests. The cross is marked at our 2019 close of probation. There's the harvest and the time of trouble. It includes increase of knowledge and the formalization waymarks, and that leads to Pentecost, which is why Pentecost, or we can see that Pentecost lines up with the second advent. And during that time, no message, no earthly support. Again, we can see that for the black X, we were at the increase of knowledge when Elder Tess gave this presentation, and now we are almost to the mark of the formalization, and we've already been given some information regarding that. Okay, now we're going to go to the next line. Go ahead.
Elder Tess reminded us that Ellen White wrote The Vision of the Path in this study about 5 months before it was published in Review and Herald, January 12, 1869. In Review and Herald, it was titled A Dream, a Dream. In part one, she pointed out that the dream occurred in 1868, and it would be 151 years to 2019 when the priest's close of probation would be marked. It was said back in 2018 that due to the symbol of 151, President Donald Trump would be impeached by the House in 2019. He had characteristics like Andrew Johnson, and there was talk of impeaching him. They both favored the South, favored slavery and inequality, and nationalism and its application. Trump was impeached by the House in 2019 as expected. And there it shows the line. Elder Tess applied the vision of the path to the line of the priest. Symbolic events of the journey correlate to historical events on the priest line. At first, they rode in wagons in relative comfort with their earthly goods, their supports. The path became narrower and steeper as it went along. They had to let go of things, and people fell away as they journeyed. It became more and more difficult. God guided and provided support for those who would accept it. So as we see on this line, starts at the time of the end, 1989, and the portion begins. Increase in knowledge, we loose the wagons. Formalization, the luggage is loose, and we're on horseback. At 9:11, the cords appear, the horses are loosed, and we have the arrival of the second angel and then the third angel. And we have the arrival of parable methodology as small cords increasing in size. In 2009, we have the study of the 2520, and our shoes are removed because it's just getting too narrow for them to work. Time set in 2012 as people fall away and the stockings are off. In 2014, almost all the weights on the cords, and we hear the cries, "We have hold from above." And the second and third angels are empowered at that time. Then we have an increase in knowledge, and the cords increase in size, or continue to increase in size. And we have the midnight cry, and we have blood on the chasm walls. And then we are at 2019, and all the weights on the cords. So as we start to move across the chasm, we have all the weight on the cords, and the chasm represents wilderness and Gethsemane, and no earthly support and no new message. Then we arrive at 2021, Penium, and that correlates with Pentecost and the second advent in heaven.
Where are the X's?
Yeah, we're at the, oh, yeah, where are we? Yes, and so we are, we were right in the middle of the chasm when Elder Tess first presented, and now we're almost to the other side. So the red X shows us that.
Mm-hmm. There's so much to say about these things. You can see how much information is packed onto this line and how we can realize how well it correlates with our experience
Mm-hmm.
on the piece line. Okay, and going forward, she went to, Elder Tess went to Acts 27. And that's about 2 ships and 2 institutions. And her focus here was on the midnight and midnight cry. And I think we'll see, I mean, it seemed to us that the lines are kind of at different scales, but we'll show you what we're talking about here. Elder Tess pointed out how midnight and midnight cry were marked at one point on the line of admonition. The precedent comes from the story of the 10 virgins, which is Matthew 25, 5 through 10. And reading the verses, verse 5 is, while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight there was a cry made, behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. Okay, then we're just skipping on to 10, because shortly after that, there comes the shut door at verse 10. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. So here we see it on the line. There is the tarrying time on one side of the midnight cry line, waymark, and on the other side is the shut door. So this is the precedent of that waymark being, of the midnight cry being at one waymark. And if we look at this line a little bit, we see that 9/11 lines up with Sidon, and that is where Paul went and visited some friends and stayed or tarried for a while. Yeah, I wanted to mention too that it says the bridegroom tarried, but when he tarried, then the others had to wait. So wait and tarry pretty much mean the same thing, I think, in a way. Sometimes you're doing it purposefully and sometimes you're just waiting. So anyway, that was the tarrying time. And then came the midnight cry at one waymark at Cyprus. And there were 2 false prophets at that time. And then and then right after that, or between there and the shut door, the Sunday law, are the seas of Cilicia and Pamphylia. And you can look at that in a couple of different ways. These weren't really discussed in detail in this study, but it was mentioned that you can look at it from the close of the 6th kingdom to the beginning of the 7th kingdom. We know that this is when a nation is overturned, and we know that the Republic of the United States is going down, and a dictatorship type kingdom is going up. We know that Seventh-day Adventist church is going down and our movement is going up. Okay, and then we compare that to the line of Alexandria and see if they both, the focus here is between 9/11 and the Sunday law, or the shut door. And the reason we were thinking they're a little bit on a different scale, maybe not so much on a different scale because they do start and end on those events, but the center has kind of an opened focus to it, because midnight and midnight cry are separate on the line of Alexandria. And we can also see that we want to point out that between 9/11 and the Midnight Cry is let's see, is that how that worked? Or was that for the other one? I'm not sure why I put early rain and latter rain. But anyway, for sure, it's the early rain that kind of coincides with the 144,000 waymark. But I guess it depends on what line you're comparing it to. And that's one of the points that we wanted to make in thinking about symbols can have different meanings and events can have different symbols associated with that event, because that's where it gets kind of complex, but it is also why you can compare different lines with one another because of the characteristics that you're comparing. So anyway, on the line of Alexandria, at 2019 is marked, Elder Test marked the midnight waymark. And as you know, we had the increase of knowledge at that waymark, and the increase of knowledge was about learning more about the characteristics of the Sunday law. And we had the two false prophets at that mark. And she was saying, Elder Tess, although Elymas was kind of interesting in his characteristics, that it was Simon Magus, or Magus, I say his name wrong sometimes, was characterized or by, or correlated with, I guess we could say, with Theodore in our movement as an internal false prophet, because he was a member of the movement that was baptized, but he did not follow the same methodology. He developed a methodology separate and made prophetic predictions that were not based on parable methodology, and that's why he was a false prophet. And then, so then between midnight and the midnight cry on the line of Alexandria, the midnight cry is labeled at 2021, and those are actually Raphia and Panium on this line. We can also see, okay, then at the midnight cry there, at the time, it's marked as time, which we know is formalization. That's when an angel came to Paul and told him about measuring the fathoms. And that was giving them or revealing the time when the shipwreck would occur, which was going to be in the morning. Also, we remember that those fathoms added up to 2520, which I thought was very interesting, because it made me think, once we understand the 2520, and I think we saw that in the line previously on the line of the path, the vision of the path. Then time, once that was understood, the studies of the 2520, then time began to be revealed. So here again, we see the black X is where we were when Elder Tess presented this at first at 2020, and the red X is where we are now, very close to the formalization. And of course, this dotted line shows that it's the swelling of the message. We're always in the swelling of the message. And I think that is also indicated by the path. The path is a upward path. It's going up, up, up towards the sky, which we think of as heaven. And it's getting narrower and narrower and more difficult to travel. It's like this swelling of the message. It is getting more specific. Okay, so these lines are for the institutions of the USA and Adventism, not for people. But we are in the same dispensation as the swelling of the message. Okay, that was a point that Elder just wanted to make for us. And as we go on, the line of the 144,000 are people, not institutions. Okay, so we were looking at the ships. They were institutions and not people. But the 144,000 are people and not institutions. And Ellen White gave us the future waymarks of Sunday law, close of probation, and second advent. And the first two waymarks are showing the preparations for a people to bring the third angel's message. So, and the preparations were made in ancient Israel. They were made in the Millerites' time, and they're made in our time of the end. But ancient Israel was a line of success and a foreshadowing of the 144,000. But the second advent could not have occurred during that time because prophetic events were needed to be in place after the end of 1260. And I think we all are familiar with that idea and what Paul said to the Thessalonians about that. So here we made this line just to kind of clarify things in our own minds here about the time of the end is also, it was 4 BC. It's also 1798 and 1989. Baptism was at 27 AD, and that's why we get that waymark labeled with that with the symbol of baptism. It was also 1840 for the Millerites at 9/11 for us. It's our tarrying time. And then 9/11, of course, was a symbol of the east wind and the woes. So, but that was all, those two first lines are about preparing to go forward to the great test, which is the Sunday law, and then the close of probation and the second advent. And those are marked significantly at 34 AD, we know. And then we know that it's 70 and 100 AD in the ancient Israel, but we don't know what the dates are for modern Israel yet. But anyway, Elder Tess wanted to focus on Sunday law, close of probation, and second advent. So we go forward to that. And well, actually, yeah, we're going forward, but we're still showing the big line, which she did show. And I think this came from, actually, these lines came from a question that was asked during the Zoom meeting. So, but it just seems so interesting that we went ahead and made them for you to share them with you. So as you can see on the big line here, the 144,000, as we continue forward in our time, from 1989, and our study of reform lines, more was revealed. We understood about the agriculture line, and that where these are, as the template for these lines, with the plowing, the early rain, the latter rain, and the harvest. And so actually up there, then that whole time up to the Sunday law is the early rain, at least for the 144,000. But another thing that I actually, if you don't mind, if I go back here, I wanted to say about how the idea here about we have the priests, we had Paul, Luke, and Aristarchus are on the ship of Alexandria. I mean, they're on both ships, but they're on the ship of Alexandria. And they go forward here at the midnight cry. And then that correlates with, then comes the Levites, and they find the 273 on that ship. And then after Sunday Law, they go forward to and land on the island, and they become a symbol of the Nephilims for us when they go to the world. But I guess I'm kind of digressing from the study because I don't think that was pointed out. It was just something that we find interesting to look at as we look at these lines.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, down here, back to here, you can see that then at between each big waymark are two small waymarks, and we know that those are the increase of knowledge, and I call it time, but it's the formalization. But the formalization usually has an element of time associated with it. So we have between 9/11 and the Sunday Law, we have Raphia at 2019, Panium at 2021. And that's where we'll learn more about what the Sunday Law test is. And then it continues. So then down here, we can place other symbols at those lines. 1989, we have John the Baptist, who is represented by Jeff Pippinger for us. At 9/11 is the baptism of Christ, and as the second angel, he's represented by Parminder. And then between the two big waymarks, we have the increase of knowledge lines up with the close of probation for the priests, which is also the cross, which lines up with the disciples at the cross. And then at 2021, we have going to the Levites, which is also Pentecost, when the disciples went to the Jews after Pentecost then. And then at Sunday Law 34 AD, we go to the Nephilims, which correlates with the ancient Israel going to the Gentiles. And so we spent, the point, I guess, is that we have spent a lot of time studying these first two dispensations in order to become prepared for what's coming, for the great test and the things that follow. Okay. Now here is where Elder Tess focused on 9/11, the Sunday Law, and the close of probation. So you can see that this is showing us that you can focus on different kind of fractals, and that helps you to determine the symbols you're going to look at and the information that will be gleaned from your study. So in this case, she lined up the symbols of tarrying time, and this is the process that led to the understanding of midpoints in the study of the revolutions. The Millerites applied the parable of the 10 virgins to their study, and so that's why we have April 19th, 1844, lining up with 9/11 in this line upon line comparison. So April 19th, 1844 was the first disappointment, and it was the beginning of their tarrying time for October 22nd. Of course, they did not know that they had the event wrong at that point. they discovered that they had the time wrong, but they were still expecting the second coming. But they did find out that the date they were waiting for was October 22nd. So from April 19th, they were waiting until that was discovered and the event came. And so as they applied, I guess they did this in retrospect, as they applied the parable of the 10 virgins, the midnight cry or the midway point was literally July 21st, 1844. Right in the middle between April and October. And that is the symbol of the beginning cry for the first group. And so that is compared with our tearing time of 9/11 at 2001. And we also put the close of, or the shut door for us, the close of probation for the priests lines up with October 22nd for the close of the Millerites shut door, and then the beginning cry for the first group in our line is 2014, our Sunday law, and that becomes symbolically the midway point or midnight. Okay, and then we come down here and see how we go from literal to symbolic. So the midway point for the Millerites corresponds to our midway point symbolically, and our midway point is determined symbolically to be 2014. So that's actually the end of the study, besides some remarks that she made that we'll share. Are there any questions or comments about these things? Okay, well, I'll share the ending remarks that she made. At the end of part 3, Elder Tess said that as people have questions, please continue to write them in, even if they don't relate directly to this study. I think we thought that was important to share with you because sometimes we forget that she and Harminder and others are available for us to ask questions, like Aaron. We're lucky to have him to ask questions of, and our other, and Elder Chiquetta, and everyone fortunately has a continental elder to ask also, or I forgot what they're
Bible
called.
worker.
Oh, a Bible worker, yeah. So we're lucky to have this. I'm really pleased with our the structure that's been developed in our organization. I think it's very supportive.
Yeah.
In future, we will be looking more closely at the line of the beginning of modern Israel, the history of the Millerites, because we need to apply ourselves after October 22. We need to understand the two lines for that history, that we are after October the 22nd, and we are also after 1861. And you can see that it gets a little complex when you're looking at yourself in two different time periods. But you can understand the symbolism and the correlation of the experience with the experience that we're having and the experiences that we have had, as you can see on that line of the path. Okay, so the two lines from the end of ancient Israel, we are after the baptism and we are after the cross. And she said that we particularly want to have those 4 lines locked into place. And in the next study, we will begin to look at the revolutions. Well, I see we did a good job of making this shorter, because before we made it shorter, it took a long time, longer than this. So are there any of the lines that you would look back on and make a comment of or study more?
Hmm.
I have a question real quick.
Okay.
Just not, my memory's not remembering exactly how we're applying midnight cry only to the institutions. If anybody can help me with that.
Well, I don't think we're applying it only to the institutions. I think that she just wanted to point out that that on the line of Adraminium, they were on one mark together. But most of our other lines, we're seeing them separately now.
But we don't use midnight cry on any of the other lines. If anything, midnight is midway, and that's 2014. So there's something special about the institutional lines. I remember her saying that only has midnight cry set up like this.
Right. I think, yeah, I was only working on them.
Oh, I see what.
I just don't remember the exact significance or how we get this.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't.
Maybe Brother Aaron can help us with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
See here?
Well, I remember that when when we first came in, which was 2017, they did talk about midnight and then midnight cry. And then remember they were looking for the prediction before midnight. And then all of that was kind of faded away when we really got into parable teaching and more was revealed. And I know when 2014 was first accepted, seriously, because that was not accepted. I don't think we kind of accepted it in a.
Aaron has written in the chat. We came up with midnight cry from fractals in 2014, but then later Elder Parmenter saw it was not found anywhere. Then Elder Tess came up with Acts 27, and we realized that sequence is only found there.
Oh, okay.
So I think it was only in that, yeah, the midnight cry Sunday law sequence only works for the institution.
Hmm.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was good.
So
It was a great review. Thank you.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
very nice. Really like the lines.
Yeah. Then down here, midnight and midway is what it's called
Mm-hmm.
when there are these lines. And actually, I do remember when we used to call 2014 midnight, and then but that was before Elder Tess's
Mm-hmm. Yep, sure.
study of Acts 27. And I think when we first studied Acts 27, many of us, I think I anyway, I don't know about everybody else, were thinking of us as that was us on the ship, which, we are on the ship, but, she really had to hit home the point that it's about the institutions
Mm-hmm.
and really make a difference between the lines of people and the lines of institutions.
Mhm.
So, well, personally, I found this very interesting, and it helps me understand better how these waymarks or midway points were developed. But I'm not sure that I understand it totally. But
Yeah, but this
well,
really
yeah.
helps seeing it again and
It-
reviewing it. It's always good to review these things.
but it helped me a lot to see how the lines are lined up with each other based not just a date, but also with the symbol of what occurred there.
Yeah. Mhm. Amen.
Okay. Well, I hope you didn't mind if you don't want me to show you any of these lines, I'll just take the share off if I can remember how to undo it. How did I do it? Oh, like this. And then I have to go to here. And here. And there's Jim. There you are. Oh, honey, you can be seen.
Oh, oh man.
I must say I'm a little shy, camera shy myself.